My name is Michael. For 16 years, I lived under the same roof as Karen and her son, Alex. From the outside, we looked like a stable, ready-made family, polished, functional, even enviable. Birthdays with too much cake. Christmases glowing with too many lights. Sunday evenings in front of the television, playing at normal. Neighbors would nod and say, "You've got it good, Mike. No diapers, no tantrums, no late-night feedings. You skipped the hard part." They were wrong. I didn't skip the hard part. I just shouldered it in silence. From the beginning, the foundation was cracked. Alex's biological father, Todd, was a ghost, present only in theory. He'd appear once a year, twice if guilt stirred him around the holidays, bearing flashy gifts that impressed but meant nothing. A phone, a watch, always enough to dazzle, never enough to matter. Then he'd vanish again, leaving behind his absence like a shadow that clung to the walls. He was a father by title, never by weight, never by sacrifice. And me? I stayed. I stayed when it meant working 2 jobs to keep the heat on. I stayed when Karen's hours were cut and groceries had to stretch. I stayed when Alex grew from a boy into a teenager who knew exactly how much power silence held. I worked myself into the ground so that Alex would never feel the shame of having less than his classmates. I bought the sneakers he circled in catalogs. I paid for music lessons he quit 2 weeks in. I kept gas in the car so he could go to school events he never invited me to attend. I was the wallet. I was the ride. I was the roof over his head. I never asked for thanks. I told myself fatherhood wasn't a transaction. It was devotion. I told myself he'd see me eventually. That time would teach him who stood beside him while the other man disappeared into excuses. When Alex turned 16, I bought him a car. Not a new one. My budget didn't allow it, but a safe, dependable used model. I still remember the way his eyes lit up when I handed him the keys. For a brief second, he looked at me not with indifference but something like gratitude. He even said it, "Thanks, Dad." That one word was enough to justify a decade of exhaustion. But the cracks were still there, buried under the surface. Karen would sometimes say, "Michael, you don't have to do everything. Todd should be helping too." But her words always came late, always when I was already past the point of no return. And deep down, she didn't expect Todd to do anything. She expected me to fill his place. Quietly, fully, without resentment. And I did. Because I wanted Alex to have a father who showed up. I convinced myself blood didn't matter, presence did. So when Alex got into university, I didn't hesitate. I paid for everything: tuition, dorm fees, books, flights. Even a summer abroad program he said would change his life. $40,000. I paid it. No questions. No complaints. Each time he came home with his laundry, I folded it. Each time he left again, I watched the door like a father watches a son he believes will one day return different. Grateful. But Alex never changed. Not really. Karen noticed. "He's still young," she'd say. "He'll understand later." Later never came. He grew comfortable in my sacrifice. Used to it. My presence, my labor, my money. It all became background noise. The engine that powered his life, never questioned, never appreciated. And the silence in response to every transfer, every check, every monthly allowance, grew louder. But I told myself, one day he'll say it. Thank you. One day he'll see me as the man who stood in place of the one who walked away. 16 years of fatherhood. 16 years of building a foundation I believed would hold. I was wrong. It unraveled on a night like any other. The table was set, plates warm with Karen's cooking. The soft murmur of ordinary conversation, the kind you believe means something until you learn it never did. We talked about classes, about friends. I was proud, even as the strain of supporting him gnawed at the edges of my budget. Proud because his education, his future, was why I worked. Then Karen made a comment. Passing joke. "People say you two look alike, Mike. They always assume he's your son." She meant it lightly. Compliment, maybe. But Alex's face changed. His fork hit the plate with a soft clang, and his eyes, those cold, unreadable eyes, locked onto mine. He said it calmly. "Don't you dare give me your last name. You're not my father." No shouting. No drama. Just that. Like a scalpel under the ribs. Couldn't breathe. 16 years. 16 years dismissed in a single sentence. In front of the woman I had carried and the boy I had raised. Karen froze. Maybe she meant to defend me. Maybe she didn't know how. Maybe the silence between us was more than shock. It was consent. I didn't reply. I didn't ask why. Because I understood. Finally. He had never seen me. Never acknowledged the weight I carried. And with one sentence, he cut the cord I had clung to for over a decade. So I swallowed it. Finished my meal in silence. Each bite tasting like ashes. Then I went into my office, sat in front of my laptop, and opened my bank portal. And I began to sever the ties. I didn't slam keys. I didn't scream. I didn't curse at the walls or break the dinner plates still warm on the table. I just acted. Tuition canceled. Monthly allowance gone. Rent for the off-campus apartment revoked. The pocket money card he used to dine, party, flirt with independence frozen. Every line of financial support, every quiet lifeline I had created to ensure his world never shook the way mine once did. I shut down. Deliberately, efficiently, without anger, only certainty. Not as punishment, but as proof that I had finally, after 16 years, heard him. "You're not my father." Okay. "Then I am not your wallet. I am not your shield. I am not your silent swallowing, labor offering, ghost living provider. You can't deny the name and keep the benefits. You can't erase the man and expect the money to linger." I didn't do it to hurt him. I did it because the truth had been spoken, and truth demands consequence. Karen knocked gently on the door that night. Once. Softly. Maybe to ask if I was okay. Maybe to defend what couldn't be defended. But I didn't open it. I couldn't face her. Couldn't stomach the pity, the excuses, or worst of all, the quiet complicity. Because here's the other truth. She raised that boy. She shaped the mouth that spoke those words. She stood by for 16 years while I carried burdens that weren't mine. She said, "Don't overwork yourself." But she never stopped me. She told me Todd should contribute, but she never demanded it. And when the moment came, when her son struck the final blow, she said nothing. I lay in bed beside her, stiff as wood, unmoving. She whispered, "He didn't mean it. He's young." But she was wrong. It wasn't said in heat. It wasn't the flailing of adolescence. It was calm, precise, like a truth long considered. The line had always existed. I had simply refused to see it. So I lay in the dark, eyes open, letting the silence settle between us like dust on forgotten furniture. Morning came. I rose early, made coffee, didn't speak. She watched me, unsure whether to comfort or confront. I offered neither option. The first ripple came 3 days later. A letter arrived, thick paper, the university crest embossed in blue. Karen opened it while I poured coffee. "Michael," she whispered. Her voice carried the kind of panic that lives in the space between understanding and disbelief. "They're saying tuition hasn't been paid." I didn't move. She held the letter out like it might explain itself. "Is this a mistake?" "No," I said and sipped my coffee. Her hands trembled. You canceled it?" "I stopped paying for a child who says I'm not his father." The mug felt warm in my palm. Her stare, colder than the kitchen tiles beneath her feet. "But he's still in school. He needs that degree. Then his father can step up." Her mouth opened, but nothing came. Because she knew, as I knew, Todd wouldn't. Todd never did. Todd was the man who offered gifts wrapped in debt, who vanished the moment responsibility knocked. Todd was the memory Alex clung to like a security blanket soaked in gasoline. And I had been the one who kept it from catching fire. No more. The next crack came fast. Alex returned from campus like a storm with legs, slamming doors, stomping through the house, demanding answers with all the arrogance panic provides. "My tuition bounced," he barked, phone in hand. "I got an email. Final notice. What the hell did you do?" I didn't rise from my seat. I did what you told me to, I said, calm as ever. Nothing. He blinked, confused, off script. You can't just cut me off, he shouted. I have responsibilities. I have classes. I looked up, met his eyes, and said it plainly. You told me I'm not your father, so I stopped acting like one. Silence, just for a beat, then rage. This is insane. No, I said. Insane is working 2 jobs to carry a child who spits in your face. Insane is building a future for someone who sees you as a stranger. This is clarity. Karen hovered nearby, uncertain. Her presence like fog. Present, but useless. She watched the battle unfold and didn't lift a word to shield either side. Alex paced the living room. Karen flinched every time his foot hit the hardwood. I can't afford school without you, he shouted. He won't help. You know he won't. He stopped. There it was. The admission. I seized it. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you erased the man who did help. He didn't respond, and I didn't soften. He stormed upstairs. The house shook with his tantrum. Karen didn't follow him. For the first time, I think she understood that I was no longer bending. But understanding doesn't mean agreement. That night, she tried again. Soft words in the bedroom. Whispers. Please, Michael. Just pay this one time. Just until he finishes the semester. He's scared. So was I said. 16 years of fear. Fear of failing him. Fear of not being enough. And look where it got me. Tears welled in her eyes. But she didn't argue again. She couldn't. Because beneath the sorrow, she knew I was right. The days that followed were a slow collapse. Alex tried to call Todd. I heard the conversations. Short, tense, ending in silence or slammed fists. His real father was still a ghost. Still absent. And now the bills came to him like specters, demanding payment for years of absence. He couldn't answer. He didn't have the words. Or the money. Alex grew desperate. He borrowed Karen's car. Begged her for cash. Snapped at her when she hesitated. And I watched silent, unmoved. Then came the night. He returned home late, face pale, voice thin with panic. They're going to expel me, he muttered. I can't lose everything. I said nothing. He dropped to his knees. Right there. In the same kitchen where he'd once dismissed me like a servant. Please, he said. Please, I'll do anything. Just pay it. Please. Karen appeared, knelt beside him, hands on his shoulders. Tears ran down her cheeks. Alex, she whispered. Get up. We'll figure it out. But I didn't move. He looked up at me, trembling. Michael, I interrupted. Do you remember what you said to me at dinner? He didn't answer. I said it for him. Don't you dare give me your last name. You're not my father. He flinched. Karen tried to speak. I raised my hand and silenced her. You drew that line, I said. And now you're on the wrong side of it. He sobbed. Real broken sobs. The kind that once would have shattered me. But now I saw through them. Not repentance. Not love. Just desperation. You want help? I asked. Go knock on Todd's door. He won't answer, Alex cried. Then maybe you should have thought of that before spitting on the only man who ever did. And with that, I stepped back and closed the door. His hands clutched at the frame. Karen wept beside him. But I didn't reach for either. Because that night I wasn't a father. I was a man reclaiming what little of himself hadn't already been sold off for the price of someone else's comfort. The door clicked shut, and I stood behind it for a long time, listening. Alex's sobs blurred with Karen's whispers. I couldn't make out the words, just the shape of desperation. Begging, promising, unraveling. And beneath it all, a silence more powerful than either of them, mine. I had nothing left to give. They stayed on the porch for what felt like hours. I didn't check. I didn't unlock the door. Eventually, the night took them. Maybe they went inside. Maybe they slept in the car. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that for the first time in 16 years, I had drawn a line. And it held. The next morning, the house was a graveyard of unspoken things. Karen moved like someone mourning a death she wasn't allowed to talk about. She made coffee but didn't pour me a cup. She cleaned the dishes but didn't look at me while she did it. Her body was present, her soul elsewhere, split between the son who broke down and the man who stopped catching him. Alex didn't come downstairs. His door stayed shut. The house felt lighter for it. I didn't ask where he went that day. I didn't care. The truth was, he didn't belong here anymore. Not because I threw him out, but because he had walked out the moment he drew that line across my chest and said, "Not you. Never you." Karen tried again that night. "He's not sleeping. He hasn't eaten. He's unraveling, Michael." I nodded. "That happens when the world stops protecting you. He's a boy. He's a man when he wants to be treated like one. But when the consequences come, he's suddenly a child again." Her eyes welled up. "This isn't about punishment." I looked at her, really looked. "Isn't it? For 16 years I paid for a life. I gave him more than most biological fathers give. And the first time I asked for nothing more than acknowledgement. Not love, not even gratitude, just recognition, he throws me away. That deserves consequence." She didn't respond. Because what could she say? That I was wrong? That he meant it in anger? That he'd always loved me in some hidden way? No, she couldn't. Because even if she believed that, she had stood still when he wounded me. And silence is its own kind of weapon. The next day, the second letter came from the university. Not a warning this time. A consequence. Immediate hold on enrollment due to non-payment. It read, "Reinstatement requires full balance within 5 business days." Karen opened it at the kitchen counter and looked at me like I had summoned the storm with my bare hands. "He's going to be expelled," she said. "I know. He worked hard for that place. I paid for that place." Her hands trembled. "You're making a point, Michael. We get it. But this will destroy him." I stood slowly, set down my mug. "You think this is about making a point. It's not. It's about showing him what real life feels like when the people you depend on stop pretending you're entitled to everything. It's about him understanding that a father isn't just a wallet. He chose blood over presence. Let blood pay." She slammed the letter on the counter. "He's terrified." "Good," I said. "Fear teaches. Comfort blinds." Her face twisted, not just in anger, but in the kind of grief that doesn't know where to go. "You're not the man I married." "I am. You're just seeing the man you ignored. The man who's been breaking quietly under the weight of this family while you watched." She turned away, pressing her hands to her face. "He's just a boy." "No," I said again. "He's a mirror, and we don't like what we see." The days dragged like winter with no end. Alex sulked through the house like a prisoner in someone else's cell. He barely spoke. When he did, his voice carried none of the sharpness it once held. Just fog. I didn't engage. I gave him silence. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I wanted him to hear the echoes of his choices. He tried again. Not with apology, not with repentance, but with negotiation. "You don't have to pay for everything," he said, leaning in the hallway one night. "Just a little. I'll figure the rest out." I shook my head. "I'm not your backup plan. You're punishing me. I'm respecting your words." His lips parted like he wanted to argue. Then he stopped, turned, walked away. Good. Karen stopped cooking for a while. Maybe it was protest. Maybe grief. I didn't ask. I made my own food, cleaned my own dishes. The kitchen became neutral ground, like a ceasefire zone where no one dared speak first. Then came the third blow. Alex's car, the one I'd bought, ran out of gas. He asked Karen for money. She didn't have enough. He used to have a fuel card. It was linked to my account. Not anymore. That night, he slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the frame. I heard him curse in the driveway. Heard his fists hit the hood. He came back in an hour later, sweaty, silent, defeated. And I didn't say a word. Karen tried again. Of course she did. "Please," she said that night, curled up on her side of the bed. "Just give him a chance. He's hurting. I turned to her. So was I. Every time he walked past me like I was a stranger. Every time he thanked Todd for nothing and forgot who paid his rent. Every time he used your silence to weaponize my love. I didn't mean to, she whispered. But you did. Every time you didn't correct him. Every time you let him call me Michael in front of people who thought I was Dad. Every time you watched me bend and never asked him to meet me halfway. Her tears came fast then, but I didn't comfort her. Because grief doesn't need a hug. It needs truth. And the truth was we had failed each other long before this collapse. Alex stopped speaking after that. He moved like a ghost in the house, visible but distant. The boy I once drove to soccer practice, sat beside at school plays, tucked in when his mother worked nights. Gone. In his place was someone smaller. Not in body, but in presence. I wondered if he knew how it felt now, to be in a home that gives and gives, while pretending you're invisible. Maybe that was the lesson. Maybe that was mercy. Then came the knock. 3 days before the university deadline. It wasn't a knock, really. It was a pounding. Desperate. Shaky. Like someone knocking on the edge of their own failure. I opened the door and saw him. Alex. Knees trembling. Face pale. Breath short. He didn't speak. Just dropped to his knees. Please, he whispered. Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Karen rushed in. Fell beside him. Held him. I stood still. Because I had to know, was this apology real? Or just fear wearing a mask? Please, he said again. Pay it. Just this once. I swear I'll make it right. I knelt down slowly. Looked him in the eyes. Do you remember what you said at dinner? His eyes welled. He nodded, barely. I repeated it anyway. Don't you dare give me your last name. You're not my father. He flinched like I'd struck him. Those words, I said, built a wall, and you're on the wrong side of it. You made your choice. Now live it. Please. I stood. Karen's tears were flowing freely now. Michael, don't do this. I looked at her. Not with rage, not with sorrow. With peace. Because I had already done it. You left me first, I said, and I closed the door. The sound of their cries didn't fade easily. It seeped through the wood like smoke. Thin, insistent, impossible to ignore. But I stayed behind the door. I didn't open it. I didn't press my ear to it. I just stood still. Because that silence, that terrible moment after the last word is spoken, had to remain intact. If I broke it, if I gave in, everything I had endured would mean nothing. Eventually, the sound stopped. I don't know who stood first, Alex or Karen. Maybe they sat there for a while. Maybe they slept outside. I never checked. In the morning, the house was cold again. Not in temperature, but in spirit. Alex was gone. His room still looked lived in. Clothes strewn across the floor, textbooks stacked with carelessness, a cup on his nightstand with water still in it. But the air was different, hollow, like he had taken all the noise with him. Karen didn't say where he went. I didn't ask. The point had been made. But here's what I knew without being told. He had called Todd. Again. I had heard the first calls. The desperation rising like a tide. Please. I just need enough for tuition. No, he cut me off. Yeah, all of it. Can't you help? Just this once? Each time, the silence after the call was longer than the words that preceded it. Todd had nothing to give. Maybe he didn't care. Maybe he did, but not enough. Maybe he had his own life, his own family now. Maybe he simply couldn't be bothered to pay for a son he never really claimed. Either way, it didn't matter. Because Alex had chosen him. Had clung to the illusion that biology meant something more than action. And now he was learning what I already knew. Biology is an accident. Loyalty is a decision. I didn't gloat. I didn't rejoice in Todd's absence. That would have made me bitter. And I wasn't bitter. I was clean. Karen moved through the house like a shadow. She didn't argue anymore. Didn't plead. But the silence between us grew heavier. At night, she would roll away from me and stay there, her breath slow and tight, like a rope pulled too taut to snap but too frayed to hold. Sometimes I caught her watching me, Her eyes weren't angry. They were searching. For the man she thought I was. Or maybe for the one she hoped I would still become. But I wasn't either. I was simply the man she had ignored. The man she had let break year after year, dollar after dollar, while she told herself the silence was peace. The next letter came 2 days later. Expulsion. Not warning. Not probation. Final. Absolute. Karen read it aloud at the kitchen table, her voice shaking. They've withdrawn his enrollment. Effective immediately. I nodded. He knew the deadline. He tried, Michael. You know he tried. Yes, I said. When the floor gave out. Not before. She slammed the letter down. You're punishing him for one sentence. No, I said. I'm punishing myself if I pretend that sentence didn't matter. She stood, tears stinging. He's your son. He was, I said, until he told me I wasn't. That night, she slept on the couch. I didn't stop her. The house felt like a ruin. Not abandoned, just broken. Like a cathedral still standing after the congregation has lost its faith. Every hallway echoed. Every meal was eaten in silence. On the 4th day, Alex returned. He didn't knock, didn't rage. He just stood on the porch with a backpack and empty eyes. I opened the door. His voice was soft. I was wrong. I studied him. The lines in his face that hadn't been there before. The slump of someone who had finally met the bottom. But I also saw something else. Fear. Not respect. Not gratitude. Fear. Fear of what life looked like without my money, my labor, my shield. I let the silence stretch between us. I'm sorry, he added. 3 words. Too late. He wanted to roll back 16 years of erasure with one whisper. He wanted to plant a seed where a tree had already burned to ash. I didn't let him in. I understand, I said. But understanding isn't enough. Respect isn't something you find only when your world falls apart. It's something you give when your world is still safe. His lips parted, but he said nothing. Until you learn that, I said. There's no place for you in my house. He nodded slowly, like each syllable cracked something deeper inside him. Then he turned and walked away. Not in anger, not in shame, in understanding. That was the last time I saw him as my son. The next week passed in strange quiet. Karen moved less now, like grief had settled into her bones. I didn't speak unless spoken to. I didn't force conversations. I didn't ask if she was okay. Because none of us were. We were ruins walking through dust, pretending the shape of the house still made it a home. She tried again. One last time. He's not the same, she said over dinner. He's humbled. I wasn't raising a project, I said. I was raising a man. She didn't answer. Because the truth was, she hadn't been raising him either. She had been coddling him, making excuses for his coldness, explaining away his contempt. And now that the price had come due, she wanted to rewrite the terms of the deal. But the debt wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. Alex had chosen Todd in theory. Now he had Todd in practice. Karen had chosen silence. Now she could live with its echo. And me? I had chosen myself. At last.